So let's move on to our teaching moment. And today we will be talking about front leg knee mechanics. So, Angel, take it away.
So I got another interesting call this week from our favorite coach, the friend to this show, Coach Larry Owens. And he asked me a question. Actually, he was telling me something he believed. A lot of times he comes up with things, something happens, he sees something. He says, this is what I think about it. And he decides he wants to check with me. This guy knows way more than he thinks he knows, and I'm always intrigued by the way a coach brings up this issue. And then there was another coach that called me a few weeks ago about getting over the front leg. And this is a front leg knee issue, but it is front leg mechanics. And front leg mechanics are so important. So if you haven't seen the show, about getting over the front leg, you need to, and I don't remember, Joe, which episode that was, but it clearly would be in the titles. But, we talk about getting over the front leg to release the ball closer to the plate because we want the hand close to the plate. We do not want the foot close to the plate. If the foot's close to the plate and your stride is too long, your hand is going to not be as close as when your stride is the right length, and your trunk can go over your front leg. So, Larry called me to ask about the front knee. And this happens to be a passion of mine because I noticed many years ago that there are many pitchers that pull the front knee backwards and straighten it as they're about to go into their release. Now, remember, we now have this wonderful visual tool, so you're going to be able to look at the photo. And Joe, you're looking at the photo?
I am.
Okay, so this is David who gave me permission. I texted him this morning and he gave me permission to show this before and after. He's a wonderful pitcher who I call Mr. Tenacity. This guy never gives up. He's going to be very successful someday if he isn't already. But this was something we just did this summer. So this guy, as you can see, is about 6'5". And he was coming to me specifically for the issue of why aren't I throwing harder? So, of course, when you're troubleshooting velocity, you have to look for the little details. Last week, there was a detail of the elbow not being straight enough. So, on this session, I was noticing, and you'll see this in the left photo, that if you notice on release, his front knee is pulling backwards, and his knee, if you do a straight line from the knee down to the ground, you'll see that that line would land about 3 inches behind his heel, correct?
That's what it looks like to me. Yes.
You see that?
Yep.
And if you draw a line from his shoulder, it would be behind his knee and probably land behind the foot as well. So you can see how he is delivering the ball. And I call that delivering the ball from behind the body, from behind the foot instead of over it. Now, in the right photo, and I chose this photo because I wanted to show you. Now, he's actually doing a drill here. And if you see those colored dots down on the mound, those are things I put down. The guys are visual, and sometimes we're measuring where does the foot land, how far out beyond it does the hand get. We move the dots around, and they're able to double check and really see for themselves in between pitches. And of course, I'm also filming, but sometimes it gives them a visual of where they need to be headed. So he was actually doing a drill here where he was pitching, and this is, of course, the exact same place in the motion as the position to the left. So these have been synchronized. Notice that his knee is not straight, it's bent, but notice the location of his knee. So we always talk about the front leg needing to have a bend in it. Well, the one thing about knee mechanics is where is the knee when it has that bend? If you look at the photo on the left, you'll see his knee is bent, but he pulled it backwards. He actually probably looked like he did on the right, but he pulled the knee backwards as he was straightening it, which pulled his hips backward. Now, if you look at the one on the right, you will see where his shoulder is in relationship to his foot, and it's definitely more out in front. But look at the hand, and on the picture on the right, Joe, look how far out in front of his foot the hand is. That's at the exact same place of release. So I'm not picking photos to make something look different. These photos have been synchronized. Now look at the photo on the left. Do you see how the hand is, it's hard to tell from this distance, but on the left, it looks like his hand might be inches in front of his foot. And on the right, it looks like his hand is 18 inches in front of his foot. Do you see that?
Yeah, I was going to say even 2 feet. Oh, looks like more than 18 inches from
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I want you guys to notice, because I thought this was interesting. Now, on the left, he's actually going faster than he is on his right. And even with that, I want you to look at how far the ball is from the hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of these, whoa, like last week. Oh, I love film. I love film. And this is the kind of stuff you can't see without film. And so what I was doing is I created a drill to show him. He comes to me, he's really good, should be in the mid 90s, hits 91, basically around 89, 90. What am I doing? And I have to show him, hey, guess what? There's always a reason. This isn't a mystery. So I create a drill that demonstrates a difference. So that's what I did here. When he saw this, he was like so excited. And that's what we want. We want, one, for a pitcher to be relieved that there's an answer. It's like going to the doctor and he says, we can't find anything wrong and you're sicker than a dog. Okay. He loves knowing there's a solution, and then he knows he can do it because he's doing it in a drill. And then you start now you've got a place to start with teaching. So then you start breaking it down, teaching them the skills. But anyway, this is the most important thing. So for the coaches that have pitchers that pull the knee backward, they're actually pulling themselves away from their release point, which means that they are cutting down on their velocity. Now, as an analytical kinesiologist, no matter what we're talking about, whether we're talking about the latest craziest contraption to help you throw harder, or we're talking about a mechanics issue that we see frequently in major league pitchers, my job is to say, well, why do they do that? Or why do pitchers think long toss is good? What are they getting out of it? Why does someone think they need a contraption to strap their arm to their head to know what the angle is or whatever it is? I'm always curious about why someone came up with something or why someone likes something, because it's in answering and investigating that question that you can learn a lot. So I figured out, and I think I have mentioned this one thing before. So, why would a pitcher position his front leg and then at the moment of acceleration pull the knee backwards to straighten it? And by the way, on the left, David's knee is slightly bent. Most pitchers slam it backwards. They slam it to where it's perfectly straight. Joe, you know what I'm talking about. You remember like Tim Lincecum
Absolutely.
did that.
Yeah. There's many pitchers do it. And there are some people that even teach that, strangely enough.
Yes, they slam it backward. Okay, so let's talk about why would this be such a common error and why I need to talk about it so you can start to realize it, even though it kind of you thought made sense. It doesn't make sense here. Number one, if you watch a good hitter, hitters pull the front knee backwards, many of them. Correct, Joe?
Yes, absolutely.
Because when you're hitting, I imagine you want the bat to swing forward, but you need to brace your weight backward so you don't go with the bat, meaning you would lose all your velocity, correct?
Right. Exactly.
You would lose your swing. Okay.
Exactly.
So what skill do most kids learn first? I mean, they're always learning hitting.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they learn it first. And they very much emulate hitters. So you pull the knee backwards because it's what you do when you accelerate the bat. Okay. But you're doing it because you do not want your body weight to follow into the ball. You want to use it from behind the swing, and you need to stabilize so while you're standing, approaching the ball, waiting for the ball to come, as you're accelerating, you're shifting your weight backwards so you can shift the weight of your rotation and bat forward. Correct, Joe? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, it's you basically need all your strength right there,
Yeah.
right around where home plate is. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Now remember, pitching is not like that. You go forward, you're stabilized when you release, and you go forward through the ball. So, what works for hitting does not work for pitching, but it's where kids develop the idea. All youth pitchers pull the knee backwards. That's number one. Now, why is it taught? Well, let's assume we have some instructors that went to graduate school. And in graduate school, when you're studying baseball pitching, if you are studied at all, you are reading hundreds of research articles. And people who study pitching love to compare pitching to throwing a football. And thus, we get people who misinterpreted or didn't interpret the results correctly. And they say, throw a football to make your arm stronger. Nothing could be further from the truth for a pitcher. And also, when you study pitching, you study javelin throwing, because javelin throwing and baseball pitching is very much compared. So, in javelin throwing, the javelin thrower is actually standing straight up and down and pulls the knee straight as he is hoisting that thing into the air. Well, his body position is over his front leg. So when he straightens the knee for acceleration, that makes sense. A pitcher is not over his front leg with his hip joint. The thrower is, the javelin thrower. So by reading that kind of research, you can misinterpret it. And I've heard many instructors say, yeah, well, in javelin, you slam the knee back, you extend the knee forcefully. In fact, if you read research, it'll say it, you extend the knee forcefully. But you're extending it forcefully from what looks like a standing position. A pitcher is not in a standing position. His hip joint is way behind his knee. It's behind his knee the way it's behind your knee if you're sitting right now. So you take information like that that's out there and you don't know kinesiology and how to interpret it, and you can get this information, and thus you have instructors that teach it because they didn't understand some nuances. So I'm here to help clear that up. Now, when a pitcher lands, just to be specific, let's talk about the details of this. The picture on the right shows the exact height that a pitcher should land at. That's about 50 to 55 degrees of flexion. Now, I don't expect you to know what that means. You lay down on the floor flat on your stomach, pretend you're about to do a hamstring curl, start to bend your knee, which brings your foot up, and stop about what would feel like a 45-degree angle. Just stop. So now your leg has not gone all the way into a full bend. You're laying on your stomach now. You're at 45 degrees. That's about the angle you want your knee at. If you turn him upside down, that's the angle it would be at. When he pitches and releases the ball, and if I showed you the next frame, you would see this. Remember, frame by frame, you've got to go like in between frames. The next thing you would see is that his knee straightens about 10 more degrees. It brings his hip right over his knee. Now his leg is more straight. And then he goes into a complete follow through. So the leg lands in the degrees that you see on the right and straightens up a tiny bit as he's releasing the ball, which is he's on his way up in this photo that you see. So that is how a leg remains intact. Now, for all of you physical therapists out there, for all of you athletic trainers, for those of you who had knee injuries, let's look at this from a different perspective. The picture on the right, the ankle and the knee are in alignment. Isn't that in life how your lower leg always looks? Joe, when you walk, is your knee over your foot?
I think so.
Yeah. When you hurt your knee and you fell, your knee was not over your ankle, was it?
No, and that actually happened to me this past winter. That's exactly what happened.
I know it did. That's why I'm bringing it up. Any physical therapist If you walked or did anything weird like on the left, slamming the knee backward, slamming. And by the way, because he's straightening it here, the next movement, it would straighten even more. He's not going to fall down to the ground. He's going to straighten it up and it'll be straight like the outside angle of a triangle. When that knee slams backward like that and there's nothing underneath it, it's not designed to do that. When you watch a ballet dancer or gymnastics or ice skaters or any sport, the knee and foot are always in relationship to each other. A golfer, I can't think of, there's never a time where your knee gets away from you. Sometimes the knee goes too far forward over the foot, and that's not good either. But this here, pulling it backwards, is bad. Bad on the knee, bad on the ligaments, bad on the low back, bad for release point, bad for follow through, bad for velocity, bad for location. Have I given enough reasons?
That's about it. That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so I was so glad to get this question. And again, and for you other coaches that called about getting over the front leg, now look again at how you get over the front leg. And this is where you have to begin to build the skills for a pitcher. You have to look at what is the task you want him to do and create a drill. And actually, we did talk about a drill for this before. This is the position the body's in when I've told you to have a pitcher just get on that one leg, lift up the back leg, and then play catch with the ball so he can learn how to be on top of his left leg and not be behind it. And that is the key to having correct front leg knee mechanics.
Well, that's very cool. And there's one question that I have for you, because there's one thing you've talked about, how pitchers wind up in this position where they're slamming back their front knee. I'm not going to say every single pitching coach I've ever met, but probably 95% of them teach to stride further and further and further and further, with the idea that the longer your stride is, the more velocity you get. So does it make sense that the longer you stride, if you overstride, it could cause you to slam that knee back in that way? Is that one of the reasons?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, actually, so here's how you get to the front leg. And here's why you would pull the knee backward, why you would have to. First of all, when you move off the back leg, your leg is staying in place. Your hips, meaning your pelvis, is moving sideways. Those are your hips. The pelvis houses the hips. So you're weight shifting, just like people weight shift. And, a lot of you guys out there golf, so you're you know how to weight shift from one side to the other. Weight shift is how a pitcher gets from the back leg to the front leg. When he shifts his hips and puts his foot down, the front hip, the pelvis, needed to have shifted far enough to have weight into that left hip, if he's a right-handed pitcher. So when he turns, he's already committed his weight to the front leg. When he turns, like you see David here, he's perfectly square to the plate. He's over, his hips made it. If your front leg juts out too far, and trust me, if you tell a pitcher stride as far as you can, he's going to be swinging and pushing and doing all these unusual things that are beyond the architecture of his body to get his leg out as far as he can. Now, when the weight shift tries to occur, he has nowhere to go because his hips are stuck in the middle. And when they're stuck in the middle, the front knee has nothing to do but to pull itself backwards because your hips have not committed enough weight to the front leg. So yes, that is why I do not like anybody talking about how long a stride should be. A stride should be as long as it can be to allow for this final position to be correct. That's how you determine correct stride length. And the real way to do it is let the pitcher pitch. And then if he's not in this position, check to see if his stride's too long. And if he's standing up and he didn't know anything about this kind of position, then his stride needs to allow a little more weight shift. So the deal is, if you are weight shifting correctly and land in a place to commit enough weight to the front leg, your stride is going to be right. So yes, the indication of where your feet should go is not a good directive, because it's where your hips go, and your leg, remember, is connected through your hip.
All right, then I would argue that there should be more emphasis on trying to get into a position like picture on the right than there should be on striding as far as you can. That would be that's what I get out of this.
Yes. And one of the things that we did end up doing, in fact, when a pitcher says, should I shorten up my stride? I always say, no, I don't want to talk about it that way. I always talk about what I need for him to do. And then if the stride shortens, then cool. But if you tell a pitcher to shorten the stride, it becomes that you now have them stepping out and they become kind of vertical. It's just a semantic thing. So a pitcher doesn't start adjusting the details of the feet, and he works more with what is the task that he's supposed to accomplish, which is moving the hips and committing enough weight to the front leg and positioning the hip, the knee, and the ankle correctly. So it's just a different way of teaching. But absolutely, you're right, Joe. Bad message about the stride length.
All right, then, and let's as a coaching initiative, let's just keep stride length out of the conversation, unless it has to come into the conversation. Let's just leave it out.
Yeah, exactly. Unless, of course, a guy is completely spread out so much that, and he already knows his stride's too long. So,
right, right. Okay, that's huge. That's huge stuff. I mean, again, almost every pitching coach I've ever met is like, all right, oh, you're 6'2", you should be striding 6'6", and we've had this conversation before, but you could see visually. Go to Angel's YouTube channel so you can see the photos that we're talking about. If you're listening in the car or in the gym or wherever you listen, or jogging or something, when you get home, you have 5 minutes, go on to Angel's YouTube channel and you'll see the two photos and you'll see for yourself. I mean, they talk about you want to add a foot to your fastball. Well, this is a way to legitimately add about 2 or 3 feet to your fastball. I mean, it literally. So.
Oh, I know. Isn't it amazing when you see it? Every time I go and search for shots and then I do the comparison film, I'm always blown away. I already know that it's further, but when you actually see it, it's scary further. So anyway, yeah, and I understand why pitching coaches teach it, but I'm here to help pitching coaches advance their knowledge in their industry.
Right.